So before we get to the main event, I want to talk about something I think is very important. Now, I get comments and messages all the time thanking me for my videos, for fighting the good fight, and I'm very appreciative of that. But I'm becoming increasingly dissatisfied with just putting out content on the internet. Personally, I want to be more engaged in public debate, and so I hope to do a little more travelling this year to various events like the upcoming Liberty Fest in Perth next week, at which I'll be speaking together with Renee Gorman on Saturday, March 9th. But prior to that event on Thursday, March 7th, also in Perth, Bettina Arndt will be speaking at the University of Western Australia as part of her ongoing tour of Australian universities, and I'll be going along to watch and document the event. And I want to encourage anyone living in the Perth area watching this to come along, bring a friend, and show your support. Just getting this talk to happen has been a major struggle since the student groups that normally host these types of events have been intimidated by a small group of noisy activists. So Bettina had to organise to stage the event herself, and the University of Western Australia has forbidden her from doing any advertising. No posters or flyers on campus, nor is she allowed any publicity in the university's social media pages. She's also had to fork out an extra $352 for 2 extra security guards. Now, it's a wonder they're even allowing this talk, but since the UWA Chancellor is former High Court Chief Justice Robert French, who is currently conducting the government inquiry into free speech on campus, which was prompted by the Sydney University protest against Bettina, he doesn't have much choice. Still, some fragile crybullies have already started a petition to get the talk shut down. And in the last 24 hours, we've learned that the University of Western Australia will provide support services for students and staff who may be distressed by the content of Miss Arndt's event. So again, I implore you, if you live in Perth, come out and support this event. If a 69-year-old grandmother can make the effort to show up and speak truth to the activist nonsense on campus, then I think the least I can do is show up and lend my support. Let the crybullies know that the silent majority still believe in free speech and the free exchange of ideas on university campuses. Now, you can find details of where you can buy tickets for the event in the comments below. Admission is $12.60 for the general public and free for students. I hope to see you there. And now, to the main event.
Martin Luther King's dream was that there would come a time when people would not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. How is today's identity politics consistent with that vision?
Jordan Peterson.
Well, I don't think it's consistent with that vision at all. I mean, the problem I have with identity politics as a mode of philosophical apprehension is that it's predicated on the idea that the appropriate way to classify people is by their group identity, in whatever fragmentary formulation that might take, in the multiplicity of ways that people can be divided into groups. And the classical, postmodern, and I would also say Marxist way of viewing the world, even though those two things shouldn't be allowed together, they tend to be, is that group identity takes priority over individual identity, and I think that's precisely the opposite of what Martin Luther King was hoping for and working for. And I think it's unbelievably dangerous, partly because when you assume that people should primarily be identified by their group, then you can also attribute group guilt to them by their group. And then things go downhill very, very rapidly. And we've had no shortage of evidence of that sort of thing happening, say, throughout the 20th century.
Are there particular groups that you are more concerned about than others? For example, the Liberal Party, as Terry Butler said earlier, is a group. Are there groups that you think are more dangerous?
There isn't a problem with groups. The problem is with assuming that the fundamental way that you should categorize people is with their group identity. Obviously, we all belong to groups. The issue is whether or not the individual identity is primary and the group identity is secondary, or the group identity is primary and the individual identity is secondary. If you're a proponent, for example, of equality of outcome, of quotas, then you de facto accept the proposition that it's the group identity that is primary, and there's all sorts of dangers that are associated with that far outweigh whatever good you're likely to do.
Okay, well, maybe you're just...
Go ahead.
Or maybe you just think that representative democracy should be representative. Maybe you just think that women should be equally represented in the decision-making fora of our nation. Maybe that's really just about having proper equality in a body that's meant to be representative.
Well, I do believe that women should have... I don't understand your question, I guess.
I guess you don't. That's pretty obvious, unfortunately.
Well, how about if you phrase it more clearly, instead of just insulting me? Look at it this way. Let's talk about quotas for a minute. So there's a very wide array of jobs that are fundamentally done by men. So, for example,
Member of Parliament,
99.9% of
sorry, Alex, I'm going to
bricklayers.
stop sledging you now, I promise.
I'm happy to give my minute to Jordan.
99.9% of bricklayers are men. Should we have quotas for women?
Is bricklaying representative democracy?
That has nothing to do with the question. The question is if there's evidence of structural inequality and oppression because women aren't precisely represented at 50% in all professions at all levels, then why don't we have a conversation about having women represented in all professions at all levels? Why do we talk about the C-suite, for example? Why do we talk about politics and positions of power? Why don't we talk about it across the board?
Okay, so let's just pause and...
yeah, but that's because it's power.
You pose a question to Terry Butler. Go ahead and answer it, then we'll hear from the other panellists.
His question to me.
Well, yeah, if you'd like to answer the question about bricklayers.
There's nothing wrong with bricklayers.
Why there are no
Of course
quotas
there's not.
So Peterson makes the obvious argument. If you're going to apply the principle of occupational categories being representative of the population, why not be consistent and apply it across the board? Now, putting aside Butler's sneering attitude towards bricklayers, she adds this idea that politicians should be representative of the population because we live in a representative democracy that represents all people. But so what? If there were a political party out there that stood for all the ideas that I believe in and advocated for the policies that I want to see implemented, there isn't, by the way, but if there was, and all that party's representatives were women, I would vote for them in a heartbeat, without hesitation, because I'm not interested in what you have between your legs. I'm interested in your ideas and the policies that you advocate for. And think about how unbelievably sexist Butler's argument is. It implies that only women can represent the interests of other women. Only men can represent men. Because all men and all women must think alike, according to identity politics. And what is so special about the category of women? Why not have quotas for lesbian women and gay men and Indigenous women? Can a straight woman like Terry Butler represent the interests of transgender women? Once again, the focus on identity obscures what's actually important in politics, the merits of your ideas. But that's probably why Butler advocates for blunt instruments like gender quotas, because her ideas have no merit. Anyway, don't forget, if you're in Perth on Thursday, March 7th, come out to the University of Western Australia and support Bettina Arndt. I'll see you next time.